We are the light of the world, and we are much more, much more.
There would have been no Caribbean studies without Arnold Itwaru. It was his vision, his energy that allowed us to build an incredible program. He energized and excited the students. He got them to convince a dean that we should establish a specialist in Caribbean studies. We owe him everything.
Professor Itwaru, when I think about Professor Itwaru, I think about the impact he had, not just on me as one person, but the impact he had on a lot of us at New College. He was a mentor, he was a professor, he was an activist, and most of all, he was a comrade. He did not put himself above us because he was a professor. He worked with us, in concert with us. He mentored us, and he was one of the most genuine academics that I have ever come across.
One of my favorite memories of Arnold is around the planning of the Jagan Lecture Series that we had founded at York University. At an important planning meeting, there was this challenge to the future of the series, and our committee were trying to figure out a diplomatic response. Suddenly, Arnold speaks, and in his deep, sonorous voice, delivers this no-holds-barred, incredible oration that was brilliant, fierce, passionate, logical, and brought in the history of Guyanese revolutionary politics. And that was it. All of us, including challengers, were left in awe. The minute taker decided this was too good for mere minutes. It would become a transcript. But that was Arnold.
So I've known Arnold for a number of years, and I've had a range of conversations about many subjects with him. But best of all, I'd say, he was always good for a brawling argument about ideas. That was his thing. He was a thinker, he was an artist, he was a man of ideas.
Arnold Itwaru was himself a revolutionary and very, defiant in a sense, but I would say unafraid to challenge the status quo through his lectures and through his academic work, his writings, his poetry, all of these things. I began to realize how radical he was, as by me taking that course and seeing the other texts that were similarly using the language that he was using.
Through his teachings, writings, and ways of being, Professor Itwaru created community. A community that promoted anti-racism, the passion for wanting to learn, fairness to each other, and above all else, the power of love.
I remember when one of our first meetings had to do with when you were teaching at Redeemer, and I was going to school at Indian Trust in high school, and for some reason, I ended up at Redeemer for a visit. I was probably visiting someone, and I ran into you, and you were on your bicycle. You weren't riding, but you had the bicycle with you. It's a black bicycle, and I was struck really by the color of your hair because it was so unusual. We were having this conversation, and I'm pondering, how in the world did you get your hair auburn looking, brownish reddish? Because everybody's hair in our group, it's mostly black, and if you're older, it's really kind of gray, really. So I remember that, and it stands out in my mind quite clearly.
I remember Itwaru talking about one of his classes. I'm not sure if it was Capitalist Press, but in the class was a particular body, and it gradually, which was gradually came to realize that this body was not enrolled in the class, and it became gradually became, there was an awareness that this particular body then was a member of CSIS, right? The Canadian Security Intelligence Services, right? Monitoring Itwaru, right? And of course, Itwaru is that kind of figure, right? You know, that calls people out, right? You know, and everything. But the person stayed, you know, continued to monitor, continued to stay in the class, right? You know. My understanding is that if I think about that story, that the person wasn't called out, right, publicly in the class, but there was awareness, there was a knowledge coming from Itwaru, there was a knowledge coming from the CSIS person that, you know, I'm here, right, I'm monitoring you, right. Eventually, the CSIS body, you know, had to leave, actually fled the class. And the reason why the CSIS body, right, fled the class, and this person told, right, Itwaru this, right, was because this body was getting too turned on by anti-colonial thought and anti-colonial practice, right? It was transforming this body too much that they had to leave, right? They had to flee, right? And I always think about that, right? You know, it's always there in terms of a small story of the impact, right, you know, of the impact that revolutionary education has, right, you know, in that transformation of the wholeness of the body, right, in political terms, right. You know.
Itwaru was a mentor, an intellectual titan, certainly within the local scene among young intellectuals and academics in my day, but he was also oddly familiar. It wasn't in his intellectual acumen that I was most inspired. The intensity and rigor of his writing, the explosive and poetic orations he delivered, or even in the renowned arrangements of his deeply anti-colonial conferences. These, of course, were originary, transformatively gripping, uniquely Itwarian.
Itwaru had a way of representing all of us. You know, he knew, he understood the meaning of the word comrade. And he knew that word so well, so that comrade to us, coming from him, was being included, you know, doing the heavy lifting. He did not just write about it. We felt he understood the plight of a lot of us who are coming from the margins of society. May it be as far as class is concerned, or race is concerned, or, you know, imperialist. Some of us are here because of our countries being at the brunt of these imperial wars. He understood that, and he made us feel included.
I was introduced to concept of decolonization, and it blew my mind. And every class I had most of the times, really ridiculous questions for him, because I really wanted to know. It was something that I was new to. And I won't forget the day, we had a full attendance that day too. And I said, "Professor, can you explain to me so and so and so?" He took a moment and he said, "You're talking dragoonry. Dragoonry. Where you get that shit from? That's dragoonry." And I know that I was supposed to turn red, but I just felt more comfortable. And after the class, I said to him, "What does dragoonry mean?" And we kind of laughed it off.
This is the major theft of people's well-being, in which people are persuaded to accept this subservient position over a supreme white God, which tells you that you have sinned and your penance is required. You see, when you do that, when you go to church and you confess and that sort of thing, you are in fact accepting being humiliated.
For me, Itwaru was the main reason I stayed in school, and what I've learned from him shapes who I am as a person today. Professor Itwaru will always be remembered as one of the greatest teachers, and revolutionaries that I've ever met, and he will always live on in my mind.
But it was in his familiarity that I was most of all inspired. He had deep resemblances to the brilliance of back home. His paintings resembled my grandfather's paintings, despite that Itwaru was Guyanese and my grandfather was Jamaican. His dancing orations reminded me of the talks and lessons I had and received from my very old school Jamaican grandmother, grandfather, and father.
In one class, he actually asked a question, if we can remember back in the Caribbean, when the teacher asked you what you want to be when you grow up. And most of the students were like, I want to be a teacher or a doctor, a lawyer, and no one else wanted to be anything else because the colonizer or the colonists instilled in us that those are the only jobs or the only important jobs that we should try to attain. We're never taught that we should learn to know our history of our enslaved ancestors or the history of our heritage.
A critical thinker, teacher, artist, writer, and poet. Someone who took pride in speaking truth to power, even when it wasn't easy to do so, and who held on to a firm belief in justice, and most importantly, his tireless capacity to dream a better world.
There was a spot in Toronto called Sunday Poetry at Ellington's, where we all went and expressed our feelings. Our activism came through a whole lot of outlets like poetry, like music.
We are the light of the world, and we are much more. We are the light of the world that warms the heart of hope. And we are more, much more than this. In the goodness of our heart have we lived, and we are more than this. In our long night of sorrow and agony and hope, we have survived. And we are more than this. So much more.
Itwaru's, the way in which Itwaru's body spoke, the ways in which just the language of Itwaru's body, this refusal to make, to say things that are, that might make people comfortable, there was a genuineness and a conviction, and you felt that wait a minute, that's how I see the possibilities. I can't speak, right? It's not a question now of feeling that I'm too much, right? I have to change my voice. I have to perhaps change my accent, right? I have to change the way I move, the way my whole body talks, right? I have to amputate myself. Suddenly there was a body there, right? That said, these are the possibilities, right? Yes, you can speak, right? You are legitimate, right? You can transform your world, right? And you don't have to amputate yourself, right? You don't have to play small, right? You don't have to talk in a way that makes them comfortable, makes dominants feel comfortable. Because all through my life, every time I spoke a truth, I could see, always feel the reaction, sometimes of violence, of silence, right? Discomfort. And it always made me then silence myself. And there was Itwaru there saying, no, this is the pathway, right? This is the pathway we go down in terms of revolution, right? This is what the possibilities for revolutionary transformation look like, right? In you, right? And in you then as a collective, right?
What is really kind of worth mentioning or reminding you about is the opening paragraph or page in the book that you and Natasha may have authored. And there is, I think it's called Opening Entrances. And it was, that opening paragraph had to do with the ways in which people become lost. And the punchline in that paragraph, or what you really wanted to really get at, in a very significant way, is that people can also become lost to themselves. And the thoughts, that opening paragraph, I have had it staying with me for a long, long time. And I think it will continue to stay with me. And that means that you'll always be in my memory.
I was honored to teach his course at New College, Indenture Survival Change, recognition of the contributions of indentured Indians to the Caribbean. Arnold was my friend who brought his particular sense of humor, generosity, laughter, and kindness to our interactions. I have his painting, The Carrion, over my desk, a beautiful, poignant, powerful reminder of our shared history of Guyana's rice fields and sugar estate, and a reminder of my dear friend, Arnold.
I miss him very much. And I miss most of all those often unexpected, as I said, brawling arguments about ideas.
I thank you, Professor Itwaru.
Because it seems to me that our liberation, and I take liberation very seriously, our liberation depends on our ability to recognize the trap that capitalism has placed us in.